Good morning, Simon, and it's a pleasure to have you here in our Beyond Consulting podcast. We're recording today the first episode, so it's absolutely my pleasure to have you here. And so we talked a bit about before. Maybe we get into all these topics and what Beyond Consulting means. Yeah, could you give us a bit of a rundown about yourself? You've been the Chief Marketing Officer of Vistatec, but you founded and a lot of things, and you're doing a podcast also yourself. So please, if you could introduce yourself a little bit and tell us what you're doing at Vistatec.
No problem at all. And Christian, it's an absolute pleasure to be here on the show. I'm delighted to be doing this with you. Yes, I'm Simon Hodgkins, the Chief Marketing Officer of an organization called Vistatec. Vistatec, if you're not familiar with it, is a bit of an industry leader. It's kind of well known in the areas that it works in. But if you haven't come across the requirement for things like localization, transcreation, translation, global content solutions, you may not be that familiar with it. It's an organization that's still privately held, has been going for almost 3 decades. We're about to go past the 30-year mark. And we work with predominantly the world's largest brands and organizations. So if you think about the biggest brands in the world, they're typically the type of customers that we work with. So we do an awful lot in terms of the global content solutions for those organizations. We're definitely known as industry leaders. We use an awful lot of technology in that mix. But ultimately, it's about providing what we love to term as global content solutions. You think about the written word, you think about audio, and you think about video, and this global explosion of content around the world. A lot of these large companies are selling their products and services internationally. The internet crosses borders, their online stores cross borders, their physical presence cross borders. And while some companies have been doing that for 50 years or 100 years very successfully, we also have a lot of unicorns that have grown but very, very fast, that are going into new countries that speak different languages, have different cultures, and keeping their core brand essence is really important. Staying true to their value and missions and building trust and reputation for that brand is really important. That's where Vistatec comes in. So I'm very fortunate to be the CMO for that organization. I hope that's a good start, Christian.
Yes, and it's absolutely fascinating to see that. Such a big organization on the one hand, and managing these really important brands, unicorns also you mentioned. Yeah. For me, coming from a consulting background, of course, always the question, how do you serve customers best? Which I think, it's of course an important question. And of course, there is probably not that one single person that does everything. So typically it's teams working for clients, as I understand. What do you consider the key ingredients to have a great team serving all these high caliber talents?
And I think my initial reaction or answer to that question would be this. A lot of the large projects that we work on can last a long time. When we onboard a new brand or a new big global customer, they could be with us for 10 years or more. We tend to grow and work closely with our customers over many, many years and even decades in some cases. So the projects are very large. To get the success, it's a combination of 2 things. It's, of course, technology. Because of the sheer scale and size of what we do, we have to build sometimes bespoke systems that interface with other systems that a client might have. And we're very fortunate to have our own internal software development department that can help us do that. But also humans, and I want to sort of term it that way. Particularly as we talk today, Christian, the world is awash with artificial intelligence, and I think the human is such an important part of what we do, because we have teams of people all over the world. Our clients are truly international. So we have to have a mix of project managers and linguistic experts and content experts who can work on these various client projects. That might mean we've got 50 people in one jurisdiction and 100 people in another geography and, 12 people over here and 28 people over there. So we have, thousands and thousands of people around the world working on these various projects. And we're very fortunate because we've been in business so long and we've built up a very good reputation. We have this pool of it's just slightly north of about 10,000 freelancers and experts around the world that do various projects. Now, they don't all work for us at the same time. Depends on the project, depends on the location, depends on the language, depends on the type of work we're doing. And we also operate more of a hub and spoke type model where we have an awful lot of project managers in country and also at our global headquarters, for example, who would manage a lot of these projects. So we have a project manager, and then we'd have sort of in-house resources and external resources, and we would build real hybrid bespoke teams depending on what the requirement is in country. And to come to your question more succinctly, how do we manage that from a team's perspective? It really is important that we have that mix of both freelancers, consultants, our own internal expertise, because it would be very, very difficult to be able to work with these global brands literally across the world without that type of a setup. Because number one, it doesn't make sense to invest in big glass towers everywhere around the world and hire, hundreds and hundreds of people when there's a particular client requirement. And the last thing I'd say on that, just to help your audience understand that particular requirement that I'm referring to, is if we work with a global brand in a particular country with a particular culture and a particular mix of language sets, it's not good enough to say, well, we've got 20 people here who can speak the language. We need people that live in that area, that appreciate that culture, who have that language as their mother tongue. It's what they grew up with, that understand the cultural nuances, that understand the latest trends in languages. And that's really important to capture that essence. So our brands that we work with are really resonating with their customers that they're trying to reach. And that becomes very complex very quickly when you start to do that across hundreds of languages, which is what we do for a lot of them.
Simon, that sounds fascinating because it's on the one hand so many people, but it's also so many different requirements that I feel. Like from an operational standpoint, I mean, how do you go about when you then say, look, we have a big project that we need to staff. What's kind of the perfect mix? Of course, maybe there might be some idea of, you need so many project managers, so many linguists, so many, different specialists on the ground or remote. But how do you then transform it? I know, for example, from my consulting times, there was always this staffing process. And then people could give preferences, what projects they wanted to work on. Sometimes it worked out, sometimes not. Sometimes an engineer got a banking project or vice versa. But overall, there was sort of like the target function was to make people as, happy as possible with the project staffings they got. How do you manage that from an operational side to really have this great mix?
I think we're a little bit lucky and fortunate in the fact that we work with a lot of the same people over many, many years. So that helps because you build up knowledge and expertise of the people that you're working with. We also, and I say this, genuinely, we have some of the best people in our industry working for us. We have real smart people that understand what this takes to achieve this global success. The onboarding process, maybe if I can just go back a little step, Christian, because I think it helps answer the question that you've raised. How do we put that mix of people together? We're probably quite tough when it comes to our selection process, and sometimes the odd person may be a little disgruntled with the fact that it's so difficult initially, we may be accused of, to actually get to work with us as an organization. And that's because our sort of initial analysis and questions that we ask people are quite rigorous, and they need to be for the type of work that we're doing. So it can take quite a while for somebody to actually get past the various criteria. We include tests in that, particularly when we're working with freelancers or agencies. We work with a lot of agencies too, where they have to do certain things and certain requirements in order to actually become what we would then, describe as a partner or somebody that works with us directly. And that can be quite difficult. Now, some people fly through it. Some people may struggle with it and feel it's a little bit of a large process. But we make no apology for that because we're working with the best brands in the world. And if you're going to work with the biggest and best brands in the world, you have to make sure that the quality of service that you're bringing is the very best that can be there. And that's why we take great pride in working with the best people who are best suited for a project. So it's not just about deciding who gets what project from the, pool of people that we have. Mm-hmm. It's about how we bring those people in initially. It's about that sort of granularity, that rigorous control that we have to put in place at the very start to make sure that the people that we're bringing in are dedicated experts that can actually do what we need them to do. Mm-hmm. Now, once we get past that stage, obviously, there are various specialisms that come into play. And that's where our global project management team come into play, because they work and help manage very complex projects with thousands and thousands of moving parts, literally every week or every month, depending on the client that's in it, to make sure that they can build not just the solution for today, but a solution that can expand, maybe contract at times, but also go into new territories and new geographies around the world. So developing a model that works today, but that is fully scalable for tomorrow is really important in our work, because the clients that come to us have a particular requirement. Let's say, for example, we're an American organization and we want to move into Germany, but we don't speak German. So all our products and services, that all needs to be thought about. But that's just step one for us. After Germany, it's France, then it's Italy, then it's Spain, and then it might be the Middle East, or, we might move into Asian countries, for example. So it becomes very complex very, very quickly, but our solution is very simple. It allows them to have a bespoke solution today, but a scalable solution tomorrow. And that's really important, because as they begin to work with us, they normally end up shipping more products or services, growing their business. And our business, fortunately, grows as a consequence of that. And because ultimately our business is fueled by content continues to grow, whether it's the corporate content they're producing, their products and services content, their customer content too. It continues to grow. And you think about that back to what I said earlier, video, the written word, or audio, that content is exploding.
And you start with that, let's say, core team, and then bring it towards a more scalable version. How does the mix evolve of the team? So you mentioned there are also these freelancers. Do you maybe, I don't know, how does it work? You have a team in the beginning that is completely Vistatec, and then over time, as there are more and more demands shipped to you from the key client, you grow the team, but at the same time, you want to stay flexible.
It's normally a mix from the start, actually, Christian. It's very rarely 100% Vistatec. Now, we'd say freelancers are Vistatec because they work with us, we have a relationship with them, etc. But it's very rarely one or the other from day one. It's normally a mix of the right people for the right job. And that's really, really important. Of course, a team would grow. So you might find an account, a particular global brand. It might start with, let's say, 25 people working on the requirement today, that bespoke solution that we're working on initially. But that can quickly morph into an account that has 250 people working on it in 24 months' time. And of course, you can't have just the same project managers that bespoke team had managing an organization now that's, look at 250 people working on that client. So we have to add in additional project managers to help that project go. We have to put in a senior management structure for that team. And we're almost building, if you like, and it's maybe the wrong way of saying it, but almost like a mini organization around the client. So they have senior, they have project managers, they have people actually doing the work, the experts on the ground. And it's a mixture of that combined with, coming back to what I talked about earlier, technology, because there's only so much throughput a human can do. So without the tools, the technology, the dashboard, it would become very, very hard to manage the sheer throughput of a lot of these projects. I hope that answers your question, Christian.
And so, I mean, you talked about from the beginning, there is a mix of freelancers, of internals, and that is evolving over time, building this mini organization, depending on how big the client is, how big the account is. How do you go about managing risks in that process? You talked about, you have this very rigorous selection process in the beginning for your own people, for the freelancers, for vendors. But then once a project basically kicks off, and I understand you're working with the top brands, and then something probably doesn't work out. How do you, manage that quality over time, especially with freelancers, which are independent, right? You cannot just tell them do something different. I mean, they're kind of self-employed. They have their own compass. Of course, they work in that bigger setting. They want to succeed. But generally speaking, like, how do you manage the quality? And did you come across some projects or case studies where that was a particular challenge, or it was always smooth?
I'd say most projects have an element of challenge in them. We have a reputation of being able to do things right and to deal with the more complex. So if you've got a problem in this particular area, we're normally the company that people would go to. Let me give you an example which might highlight it and bring it to life a little bit. So if I think about one of our brands, I won't mention the names because of various NDAs and sort of agreements that we have with a lot of these top brands. But one of our clients is a global technology company, definitely recognized as one of the top most valuable brands in their space. So we're producing, I suppose, a vast quantity of diverse and brand-sensitive content on a continuous basis. And I just want to flesh that out a little bit for you. So this customer in particular that I'm thinking about, they require consistent, accurate, on-brand content of varying origins on various channels across all the languages that they need. So for this organization in particular, we have 800 linguistic expert resources just working on that one project alone. They're working across 100 languages to deliver, on average, about 15,000 projects per month.
Wow.
And they track it. They're tracking over 70,000 project line items to track. And each project has an average turnaround time, a task, of less than 48 hours. Now, why their customer works with us is because that project that we put in place for them, which is on an ongoing basis, gives them a 30% reduction in their costs, and it gives them a 40% improvement in their communication success. But to manage those large volumes, the client needed a fully automated sort of online collaboration system that would assign the content to the relevant linguistic resource to keep them informed about each of the project's status. So a management dashboard is required so that the internal project management people could notify linguists of the status of individual projects and also check on the availability and the capacity of the resources in real time. And additionally, that sort of bespoke dashboard that we had to build and that system that we had to build, it needed to aggregate quality information to capture the state of the quality of a given language and trigger those quality improvement plans as they're required. So in order for us to make that solution work for the customer, we need to put in place a fully automated, scalable, distributed system with this interactive dashboard that I mentioned, tightly integrating systems via APIs that support that seamless content flow of big data management. And all the information retrieved by the system backend is then made available on a front-end web application, which is accessible to all the stakeholders on the project. And this seamless access to, let's say, all the program-related data remains within this interface. So it's personalized information, given the status of the projects. The project's updates can be shared between all the stakeholders without the need for emails all the time. There's live information on availability of resource, and there's quality information provided by the program, which is readily accessible to drive improvement plans. Now, that's just one example, and that wouldn't be a particularly large project. If you remember at the start, I was talking about 800 linguistic resources across 100 languages, delivering 15,000 projects per month, tracking 70,000 projects. We would have projects much larger than that too, and much more complex than that. But I think that might be a good example to bring to life for you how we go about managing that. And it's back to that technology plus human expertise. That's really how we bring that solution together. Are there challenges? Of course. Do we manage those really, really well? And things like quarterly business reviews, half-year business reviews, full-year business reviews, continual improvement. And the good thing about what we do is we don't just provide the solution today, we provide the solution today and the scalability for tomorrow. But our clients rely on us to bring to them what they need to be thinking about for the future. So it's not just about today's, like that example I gave you a moment ago. It's not just about that. It's about what we'll be doing in 6 months' time, in 12 months' time, in 18 months' time, in 24 months' time. Where are we growing this to? And that's why we have probably one of the highest, not only one of the highest staff retention rates in the industry, but also a really high client retention rate. We typically work with clients, as I said, over many, many years because it's a relationship that works and we grow together.
And if we stick for a moment with that system, and I find it super interesting, I mean, I would consider, 800 linguists in 100 languages quite an extensive project. We say, well, it can get even bigger. So all those people working on the project, would they then also see their own metrics? So does it cascade down into completely the organization? And maybe you have, this team working on something, it's a mixed team. The internals and the externals would see basically their own KPIs or whatever data basically is relevant for them on the quality of the content that
in-house
generating.
We would have that level right down to the granular level of the individual's contribution to the project, and obviously the time that's taken on particular work, etc. And that's why we need these systems and dashboards. And the great thing, going back to what I said earlier about having our own internal software development department, is we're very technology agnostic, I should say, Christian, meaning if there's a solution out there that somebody else has built and we think it's fit for purpose and the right solution for the job, we've no problem taking that, adapting it and using it. But in some cases, there is no solution that we think will do the job perfectly. And this happens a lot with very large global organizations. So we often can end up building a solution like the one I've just described to you, that will actually allow them to have that dashboard visibility, that real-time live feed of where a project's at, that ebb and flow of resources available. And the good thing is when we need to scale, we can add more technology or add more people, or typically both, and we can scale from there. Now, I'm making it sound very, very simple. There's a lot of very smart people behind the scenes that do a lot of this hard work. But I mean, another example, if I just be real quick, we've got a client, probably one of the best known, how can I describe them without giving them away? Best known, a leading outdoor gear, brand. So if you're into the outdoor world, this brand, if you're buying this kind of clothing or equipment, you'd know this brand, global. So they also produce electronics as well, this company. Probably confusing people a little bit now. But in 150 countries. So they were a really popular brand with millennials and outdoor sports enthusiasts and sort of documentary people. But they needed a partner that could help them with their support across all these different 150 countries. If you think about each of those countries has different mix of populations, different mix of languages, different mix of cultures. So to remain true to that organization and to appeal to their, I suppose, what could be their international customer base, they don't need to just translate their message, but they need to do what's called transcreate it authentically across borders, because it needs to resonate with each one. So that's the kind of work that we do. And in order to do that, the reason I bring that example up is because we needed to assemble in-country review teams, ICRs, hand-picked reviewers. So these in-country review teams cover a wide range of tasks for this particular client, including the review of the marketing materials, the review of the media assets, testing online purchasing experiences, providing, that valuable feedback to improve that client's overall customer experience. And those improvements were also made to their internal processes, including the instruction of a really important thing, which was, confidential preview sessions for these in-country review teams. So that aligns with the client's need for extreme confidentiality around increased confidentiality around products that aren't yet released. If you think about technology companies that are releasing the latest gadget or gizmo onto the world's market, it's quite a confidential thing that can't leak before it's ready to be on the global stage. But putting together not only the process around that, but this very dedicated in-country review team and hand-picking those reviewers, that's where the human meets the technology. I just wanted to give you that one as well, Christian. Slightly different to the example I gave you before in terms of how we manage those sort of project teams and mixes.
Yeah, and I think that the trade-off here is really to, how much confidential topics do you want to give maybe external to agencies or freelancers versus what you keep in-house? How can that be orchestrated? But I think that is more from a regulatory perspective. Everyone has a solid NDA and it's enforced. And if you want to work with the best, well, you keep your mouth shut, right? Otherwise, you're out. I assume pretty much. What struck me really is, Simon, when you said, look, we have a very high retention rate also because of that model that we have. Why do you think is that? Is it because you're just working with the best brands, because you have those mixed teams where expertise comes in and people, can frequently upskill? And is that something also where you see, that mixed team, that is something going forward where we'll see even a higher share of new expertise coming in and less in-house staff? Where will that go from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I don't think it's just because we work with these big brands. Because big brands have big demands and they are very, very clear on what they need, when they need it and how they need it. So the specific requirements for a big brand can be extremely demanding. So I think the success rate and the longevity of our client relationships is down to a few things. Trust and reliability are really, really important. A big brand needs to trust that you're the right organization to work with, that they can trust you to actually deploy the solution that you've talked about, that it will actually work for the customer. But ultimately, what it comes down to in our world is outcomes. So whereas most companies are out there talking about all the great things they can do, what we try to really focus on from day one with our teams and with our customers is, what is the outcome that client is trying to achieve initially? And from there, what other outcomes can we help them build for the future that are successful and aligned with their global mission, their global values, and their global goals? So when we talk about global content solutions, which I've mentioned that phrase a few times, what we're actually talking about is not just a solution from a language, a content, written word, audio, video perspective. But we're talking about a solution for actually what the client is trying to achieve. And you can only do that if you do quite rigorous and deep understandings and discovery conversations with that client in the first place. And things can change. Things can ebb and flow, as you know, in all organizations. When you start a year and when you end a year, something has changed along the way, and there's always that continual change that happens in business. Economic factors, things beyond your control, can happen that your business needs to react to and be agile in terms of its approach. So we're very proud of the fact that we bring a lot of that to the table in terms of not just thinking about the today, but thinking about the tomorrow. We're also very proud of the fact that we have a long history of being able to provide successful outcomes and focus on successful outcomes for customers. And the bottom line is customers wouldn't stay with us if the results weren't tangible. So if you're talking about dealing with thousands of projects a day, for a particular client in this space, the results are very tangible very quickly. You can see whether something's working or not. But ultimately, the bottom line for a customer is, are our customers closer to us than they used to be? Is it improving our brand reputation? And importantly, are we selling more services or shipping more products around the world? And if the answer to those questions are yes, the relationship is typically working. If it's working in particular areas, of course, we can identify that and adjust appropriately. But it's about deploying a scalable strategy, deploying scalable localization, which is only achieved by bringing this pool of experts together, along with the technology, consolidating it, maintaining it, and developing that for a continuous process that brings cost control, improved efficiencies, revenue growth that makes a difference to the bottom line, makes a difference to the shareholders, and is in line with what the board is trying to achieve. So I know I'm kind of being quite broad there in what I'm saying, but I think that's the secret sauce. It's about delivering on the client outcomes and then over-delivering on the client outcomes and really helping them move to the next level. In our industry, we have something called the Localization Maturity Index, which helps a company scale up how good they are at sort of being international, if you like, their maturity around their localization approach. And quite often a company can be very large, but quite low on their maturity index when it comes to understanding the intricacies of operating successfully globally in multiple countries.
And Simon, am I right that you're saying, so look, this advanced model, which is completely consistent in itself, then leads in return to that you have exactly these high retention rates of the employees because it makes them thrive and people really like to, work in thriving organizations.
Our chief HR officer, Siobhan Gantley, she does a great job with her department across the whole organization. So, doesn't matter where you are on the planet, our HR department is constantly working with all of our people to create the right environment so people feel as though they're part of the organization. They focus an awful lot on things like health and wellness and mental health and having fun too as an organization, right? Because the work can be quite demanding at times. So our HR department really help us. They also obviously help tremendously when it comes to recruiting the right talent in the first place and getting the best people to work for the organization. You'll often hear a lot of top technology companies paying, to get the right talent, to get the right people, to get the right skill set. And that's no different in our industry. We have to have the best people to deliver the best outcomes for our clients. But we also spend an awful lot of time training people, upskilling people, leveling up people and focusing on people's career opportunities and growth opportunities within the organization and across the world. And that's a really important part of it that you've touched on, because without the people, you can't achieve this. And we kind of really focus on that an awful lot at Vistatec, and it really is important. But if you're part of a team or a group working on a particular client, and you see that client achieving success, it kind of builds together. You want to do more for that client wants you to do more for them. And we end up getting more and more business. So from an organic growth perspective, I'm not talking about going out and buying companies and adding revenue that way. From an organic growth perspective, it is a great situation to be in when you see a company's bottom line or top line revenues changing significantly over a period of time because they're entering new markets, they're growing their business successfully, and that strategy is working. And that helps not only retain the client, but it retains the people because you're all part of this big success story, Christian.
And it's probably a bit of a theoretic question, but of course you could say, look, to even enhance this group feeling of working for one client, achieving together, why not make everyone completely in-house and you can 100%, have the control. You can 100% work as a group together on achieving something. So what's exactly sort of like the trade-offs or the decisions? Yeah, you that make you actually use that hybrid model that you have, where you say, maybe, as I understand, you have that project manager, he's got some freelancers, you go in various countries with a lot of specialists required for that in those countries?
It's a good question again. And I think the answer is that there are a few things driving that. Number one is post-COVID, post-pandemic. A lot of people work differently today than they used to do. I think a lot of global headquarters, even those of our clients, I know there's some return to the office and some big companies are calling for that. But in the main, a lot of top organizations, they have a very flexible model now. We hear the word hybrid working all the time where people do that. We also have different jurisdictions, different legal requirements in different countries around the world. How you hire people, how you pay people, the tax implications of that on a global scale are actually a little bit complicated. So even how you pay, retain, how you treat people, what you call people, whether they're freelancers, workers, consultants, the language and the terminology has very different meanings in very different legal jurisdictions around the world. And making sure that you do that in a completely open, honest, and clear and professional environment is really, really important. The other thing I would say, though, is that getting the right talent, whether you work directly for an organization or indirectly for an organization, or even through an agency model, and not necessarily as a solo freelancer, it's about getting the right people for the right project at the right time. And in order to do that, I think in our work, in some cases, that would be very, very difficult to do that with fully in-house. In actual fact, a number of our clients have tried that model. So they try to do everything that we do for them and say, well, we'll do it ourselves. We'll just hire hundreds of people. We've got the office space. We've got lots of glass towers around the world. Let's hire a few hundred people. We can do all this ourselves. Let's hire a few experts. And typically over a number of years, typically takes 1 to 2 financial years, they realize that it's not their core business. It's not what they're skilled at. They thought it might be a better approach for them to keep it all in-house originally, but they soon run into problems. They can't scale fast enough. It doesn't work. And that's why this blended hybrid mix of teams works well in an international setting, because you need a particular team to pop up tomorrow to be effective tomorrow. And you need to be able to do that at speed, because speed and agility is really important for a lot of the global products and services that these companies are doing. If they need to move, they typically need to move quickly. If they need to adapt to a particular market trend, it's happening now. It's not something we can say, well, give us 6 to 8 months and we might have a few in-house people. We need to be able to create that solution literally within days. And we're very fortunate to have a pool of people internationally that we can work with to do that we trust, that we rely on, that have been working with us for years. And customizing teams based on specific project needs, the benefit of that flexibility and the benefit of adding the specialization within that team formation is really, really important when you're working with these type of clients. I hope that answers the question a little bit, Christian.
Yes, I find it super fascinating, Simon. Thanks a lot. Yeah. There is maybe one last question. If you think about the mix, and we talked about it now a lot from freelancer, the in-house people, let's maybe fast forward 10 years. Yeah. Now I understand it's kind of, half-half, let's say. There's always going to be in-house resources, planned team of freelancers and agencies. If we fast forward in 10 years, how will the world look like? I mean, a lot of people talking about AI and platforms. Will there be just, that whatever, LinkedIn for your internal resources and you just staff people from there? Will it be, mostly freelancers and just only few in-house people with technology managing those resources? Will it just stay the same? What's your view on that?
10 years from now, I'm not sure most people have any idea. But given the current state of artificial intelligence, given the current discussion about agentic AI, given an AI agents, given the recent announcement by Google in terms of quantum chip, The future looks extremely bright, extremely exciting, and extremely frightening, all rolled into one. However, to look at your question from another perspective, a lot of people use the term human in the loop. You've probably heard that. A lot of people use it when they talk about AI, that you need a human in the loop because it makes mistakes, it hallucinates. Now, AI is getting better. Every release of AI, whether it's OpenAI, Gemini, Claude, whatever, it's getting faster and faster. It's getting better and better. I believe the next release from OpenAI is going to be substantially bigger than what we're currently using today. And what we're currently using today is quite mind-blowing. We're very fortunate to have been an early adopter of AI. However, instead of human in the loop, we more transcribe to an industry term in our industry, which is human at the core, which is a little bit like having a project manager, I suppose. You need a human at the core to make sure they can make sense of all this benefit that's coming from the world of AI. Do we use AI? Yes. But in our industry, machine translation, going back many years, was around before all this current hype of artificial intelligence. So we're actually one of the industries that was kind of pioneering artificial intelligence from the earlier days. And we do use artificial intelligence today, but we do it with a human at the core, and we do it with linguistic expertise. So we find work that can be done by AI has to be checked by linguistic expertise, and that's the world today. Will that change over time and your time frame of 10 years? Yeah, definitely. But ultimately, for us, we're very focused on having humans at the core of the project to make sure that we're actually delivering on those positive client outcomes for tomorrow. What does the world of work look like in 10 years from now? Very different to what it looks like today. I think we're still struggling with the post-pandemic way of working, and some big organizations are trying to desperately tease people back to their offices. Other companies have said, hey, we're just work from wherever you want. We're completely remote first type organization. But we are seeing changes in the workplace. We're seeing changes in the type of work. There are huge societal questions, as you know, I'm sure, that come with the technology explosion that we're experiencing now. And there's good and bad to that. But for now, we're very, very focused on using AI for good, making best use of the tools that we have. Being technology agnostic as an organization allows us to do that very, very well. And we're very fortunate to have a lot of bright minds when it comes to the technology side of things within our organization. But we're very focused on humans at the core and making sure that the quality is at the highest level for our clients, Christian.
Thank you, Simon. I think that's, I think personally I can relate to that a lot. I think it's been a really interesting discussion. Learning a lot about the view in your industry, but also how hybrid teams play an important role, how human in the loop or human at the core actually is super important to drive that great success, really working for the top brands. And from my end, I would love to thank you a lot for being on the show today. It's been my pleasure. And would love to continue, of course, also in the future if there are future topics coming.
Well, Christian, thank you very much for inviting me on the show. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you today.